whether disinformation has the potential to sway the outcome of elections. How is Russia doing this? Who is vulnerable to this, and what can firms, especially social media firms, do to stop this? So just to be clear, first of all, disinformation means the spread of false or misleading information, and this is spread deliberately in order to deceive, which is distinct from misinformation, which is the spread of misleading information, but without that intent to deceive. And essentially, what disinformation is designed to do is to undermine democratic processes in other countries by influencing public discourse, discrediting institutions, governments. It seeks to influence the outcome of elections, but also just undermining trust in that electoral process itself. So the most obvious example is the US 26th presidential election. Disinformation there was designed to provoke political and social discord, and if possible, influence the outcome in favor of Trump. Disinformation is typically spread by either traditional pro-government Russian media, such as RT and Sputnik, which you may have heard of. Obviously, they have a huge following and budget, but it can also be spread by Russian military intelligence, the GRU, who you also may have heard of, and also the Kremlin-linked Internet Research Agency. And this is an organization run by a man called Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's a close associate of President Putin. He's subject to US sanctions for meddling in the 26th US presidential election. And the IRA research, the research agency, essentially is responsible for running fake social media accounts who try to manipulate local actors, say based in the US, and just have some kind of influence on public discourse. And in terms of the discourse that they try and influence, it's usually divisive issues in the West, things like COVID-19, migration, protests of police brutality, issues that are already very divisive and controversial. Disinformation will try and exploit that even more. Now, it's a real struggle for Western governments at the moment who are trying to counter this spread of disinformation. You understand how we're increasingly relying on social media as a source of information. It's so easy for unverified claims to become amplified on social media. And really the government and social media firms are just struggling to keep up with that. And there's this challenge for social media, tech, telecoms firms all to play a greater role in halting disinformation and increase their regulation. But I think this is going to be something that a lot of firms really struggle to do. Enforcement is always going to be pretty uneven across the board. And you also have the problem of, associated actors will always just move to adapt their tactics to circumvent any new restrictions. So there is really, a need for people to be able to spot disinformation better, just be able to know how to recognize that. And that is definitely a challenge that the government is going to have to address.